All right. Hi, everyone. Mark Foley here with Inner Evolution Fitness. I'm here today with Victoria Hasenyager. All right. Victoria is a dietitian originally from Springfield, Illinois. She graduated from Illinois State University with her degree in food, nutrition, dietetics. Then she got her graduate degree from Loyola University of Chicago. Then soon after, she fell in love with Colorado, which we all do, and moved out here to begin working with it with her dietetics degree and started to work with Tracy Mann with Everyday Nutrition. And now she is currently on the board for the Colorado Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, where she is the treasurer-elect and next year will become the treasurer. So thank you, Victoria, for coming and talking with me today.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, very cool. So how are you doing?
Pretty good. Can't complain other than staying indoors all the time, but
Right.
Trying to flatten that curve.
For sure.
Doing our part, doing what we can.
For sure. I'm trying the same. Getting a little stir crazy for sure, but that's what we have to do, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly. It's a new challenge, but every day just try and do something a little bit different. I feel like that kind of helps.
For sure. For sure. All right. So what have you been doing yourself with like a business? Are you still seeing clients or talking to them?
Yeah, definitely still seeing clients. The rate of getting new clients has definitely diminished a little bit, which is a little bit difficult, but I see a good amount of clients still on a regular basis, which is really nice. I love all the clients that I have and following up with them and seeing how they're doing, trying to help them stay on track with any health goals. Just kind of give them an open space to voice any concerns and try and find productive ways that they can still incorporate some healthy habits into their new daily normal routine.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So what about with yourself? What are you doing to help flatten the curve? It seems like doing a lot of social distancing.
Yes, definitely a lot of social distancing. Mainly the only person I really see is my roommate and her dog, Darwin. But in the morning I'll still go out and try and get some fresh air just because walking, getting in nature, that kind of helps ground me and kind of recalibrate me for the day. And then, I just try and find productive things to do throughout the day, whether I try and do a little home workout, whether it's reading, meeting with clients, doing a puzzle, just reaching out to friends, family, and just still kind of having that community. I feel like that really helps.
It's been helping with me for sure. So that sounds pretty good. Yeah. So I'm always curious, what do you do for your workouts then?
So lately I feel like I've been struggling with motivation. I usually will do a bar class and then I do Camp Gladiator, which is an outdoor workout and it's kind of community. It involves like a lot of weights. Every week is different. So they have like an interval week, a strength and agility week. So that's where I kind of have like both sides of the spectrum with working out. So it's been a little bit difficult switching it indoors, but I do have some resistant bands, some exercise equipment, like some weights and a kettlebell. And I've really just been doing the deck of cards workout. So for each suit, I pick a different exercise because I feel like that's easy to go through. And
it keeps it random for sure with the reps and stuff like that. All right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're keeping it varied. So that's awesome. Very, very cool. All right. Well, since you're still seeing like a lot of clients, like what are some stuff that you've been helping them out in terms of like the stuff with like the pandemic, like mental health, like nutrition? What are some of the things that you're doing with your clients?
Yeah. So one thing that I found that kind of has been helping me a lot, and one thing that I like to talk about with my clients, because it's such a stressful time and there's so much uncertainty, I really just try and focus on the mental aspect of just taking it like one day at a time, sometimes one moment at a time, and asking yourself, what can I do in this moment, or what can I do today that kind of helps me tomorrow? Especially in terms of succeeding with your goals, if you have any, or whether they're just maintenance. So if it's prepping some snacks for you and your children so you don't feel like things are chaotic the next day,
Sure.
If it's getting some fresh air and going for a walk, even if it's calling someone, you know, it can be nutritionally related, but it can also be something else that's related. Um, I'm also just trying to focus on some intuitive eating aspects too, whether that's something I was already working on them with or just kind of bringing it into. One of the principles is knowing how to cope with your emotions without using food.
Okay.
And I think just kind of identifying like, am I bored? Am I stressed? What's kind of going on? And one thing that I was rereading it throughout this week that really stood out to me was, you know, during stressful times, we all have coping mechanisms, and those can either be positive or sometimes they can be negative. And usually, you know, once you work through it, you learn to develop better coping mechanisms as you get older and as things go on. But as new stressors present themselves, things kind of can revert. And I think this is a global stressor that no one has ever encountered before.
Right.
So I think a lot of those old habits or those old things I kind of see creeping in either within myself or with other clients. So I always say it's okay because this is something you've never experienced before, but
Mhm.
try and shift that narrative for them.
Okay. So it seems like being mindful of like why they're doing this. Is that kind of the approach you have?
Yeah, definitely.
Very cool. Very cool. That sounds nice. But yeah, I've definitely had some coping mechanisms with eating for sure, and I'm trying to
Mhm.
revert back to more of the basics of what I've got going on for sure. So
Yeah,
okay,
I think going back to the basics in general and just kind of resetting those foundations at this time can be really helpful.
gotcha. All right. So going along those lines, like, is that what you're trying to focus on? Is just being intuitive and like not trying to stress yourself out with trying new things with nutrition? Like, what are some of the basics and some of the tips that you're giving to people?
So a lot of the basic tips are just something that I talk about with everyone is really trying to regulate your blood sugar and your insulin because that's something that we all have going on within our bodies.
Hmm.
Most people eat carbohydrates or somehow your body can break down some storage forms and you still have glucose going on through your blood and insulin has to uptake that or help uptake that into the cell.
Hmm.
And so over time, if you're becoming stressed, your blood sugar actually just rises on its own. And then usually if you're eating and it's not really varied, if you're not having, you know, a healthy fat and some quality protein and maybe some more fibrous or fiberful carbohydrate, like a complex carbohydrate, it can throw off your blood sugar and start to create that lower grade inflammation, which is something that we want to prevent, especially right now. So that's something that I always kind of go back to the basics. Are your meals balance a little bit more with those macronutrients, which is a carbohydrate, a fat, and a protein, and
Hmm.
especially with your snacks too. Are you having a little bit of carb, and are you having some protein or some fat with that? The one thing that I like about balancing it that way is usually when you start to break down carbohydrates, that's the first thing that you break down. And you start to break down with an enzyme in your saliva called salivary amylase. So that's the first thing that you kind of start to break down as you're chewing. But the rest of the macronutrients, whether it's fat or protein, you don't start to break those down until you get into your stomach.
Hmm.
So as you're breaking those down and metabolizing them, glucose is usually the first thing to get uptaken into the blood. And what I want to do instead of having that big spike in your blood sugar, because that's what can cause that dysregulation with insulin and with your blood sugar in general, is just trying to combine that with the fat and the protein.
Okay.
So instead of that spike, it's going to come slowly up and then slowly down. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, yeah, for sure. All right, that's a good information.
Yeah.
For some of the people that don't know, you're talking about the low-grade inflammation. Could
Hmm.
you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. So over time, low grade inflammation, this is something that can just happen as we naturally age, but we want to try and prevent low grade inflammation long term because that's what can lead to some secondary issues like diabetes, heart disease, cancer. and some other diseases, and that's what we want to prevent. I know Tracy did a pretty good job explaining exactly what low-grade inflammation is on her episode of the podcast. So I don't really have anything much to add on to that other than stressing the importance of wanting to just balance things a little bit more.
Okay, balancing things in terms of like just a balanced meal.
Balanced meals, balanced snacks, and then balanced eating times. So I always like to try and get people to have a snack every 3 to 5 hours. Everyone's body's a little bit different, and people can usually pick up on their own low blood sugar cues. And that could be something from, lacking concentration, getting a little sweaty, a little shaky, sometimes you're irritable, that hangry kind of feeling. Those are all signs and symptoms that your blood sugar is kind of starting to drop, and that it might be useful to have a snack or a meal.
Gotcha. Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
What about people that are trying to, like with all this extra time, a lot of people are putting more focus on like their fitness and their nutrition. I know for like losing fat, that can increase a lot more stress and cortisol and throw off like a lot of things in their body. What do you think for that? Do you think people should be doing that? What's your opinion?
As I kind of look at it as, are your basic needs being met? So if you're incredibly stressed about, like say you lost your job and you've got a family and you're like very worried about, like, how am I going to afford this? Like, how am I going to homeschool my kids? How am I going to do all of these major life stressors? If you're so stressed to that point, then I'd say maybe take a backseat on some of those other stressors right now, like dieting and exercise, just because that's going to further like kind of cascade and spiral.
Yeah.
But if you're still able to kind of create some daily routine within your life, if you're still working, if you're not stressed about some of those other basic needs, then I think it could still be a pretty good habit to form or keep with your habits if you've already kind of gotten them.
Very nice. Okay. So what are some signs that you would see, like maybe people aren't as intuitive or in tune with like their own stress levels? Like if they started dieting or like trying to reach some of their health goals, what are some ways that people can like see that it's not working for them?
If people start to have some obsessive thoughts, if they're starting to turn some of those thoughts negatively, like something like, oh, like I can't have that piece of cake for your birthday, like it's gonna mess me up. Or if they're constantly thinking about, okay, what am I gonna eat next, how can I eat next, maybe I have to go burn this off. Like I definitely know that eating this movie theater popcorn, that's how many sprints down a football field. I've heard people say that plenty of times. And so it's those negative and obsessive thoughts. And then when they start to label things as, that's not a good food, that's not a healthy food, that's not a good exercise, that's not going to do anything for me, those are little cues that I start to pick up and think maybe we should take a back seat to some of that dieting and maybe reflect on some more intuitive eating processes.
Very cool. Okay. All right. Any other tips with like the intuitive eating? That seems like that's your big approach. Like if
I
someone,
think especially right now with everything that's going on, I was even texting in a group of my friends earlier, and they were all saying like, I can't stop snacking and all of this. And I just want to give people the platform, or just change that mentality and just say, that's okay right now. Like this is a completely different situation. And that doesn't mean that it's going to become something that's chronic or long-term, but, ask yourself why am I eating? Am I bored? Am I stressed? Keep going back to that and keep asking yourself why. I feel like that can be really beneficial during this time.
Yeah. So asking yourself why you're eating, but also still be kind of kind to yourself and not be like really mean in these stressful times. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, exactly. And, if you're starting to label the food as bad or good, I just kind of go back to try and make it balanced in some way. Like one of my favorite foods is cookie dough. I love cookie dough, but I know it's usually a little bit higher in sugar and things along those lines. So what I do is like, okay, if I'm going to have some cookie dough, I usually try and have like a dessert or something followed kind of right after a meal, because I know I've got some other things like protein and fat and my body's metabolizing other things. So it's not going to spike my blood sugar and cause some imbalances that way. So there's always room and ways that you can still include your favorite foods, and you don't have to label things necessarily as bad, but you can find sustainable ways to still have them. And that way you're not restricting so much that you can get to that point where you end up binging on that food.
Gotcha. I know for myself, if I have something coming up, like if there's going to be cake or something that I typically don't eat, I like to have a good solid workout beforehand, like pretty
Yeah.
close to it, and then also a good healthy meal. Typically, so the excess sugar, the glucose goes to more of the muscles.
Exactly. So there's more than one way to try and balance that.
Yeah,
You don't just have to, balance it with food. You can balance it with exercise as well, just like you said, because you know that your muscles are going to want to uptake that.
yeah, for sure. All right. Well, a big thing that a lot of people are dealing with self-isolation and COVID-19 is a lot of people are trying to be actionable about their immune system. And there's a lot of very basic stuff, and there's a lot more like fringe type of stuff that people are suggesting, which there's no research upon. Like, what are some of your tips that you're giving to clients, or what are your ways to help increase or normalize the immune system?
So again, it kind of just goes back to that basic principle of trying to regulate your blood sugar. I think that's first and foremost what you can do right now. I know I kind of get on my family about that a lot, especially maybe my dad, someone who has diabetes.
Okay.
And we know that people with hypertension, heart disease, and diabetes, those are the like three of the more chronic diseases that people usually see some worse effects from the coronavirus or COVID-19.
Mhm.
And so just trying to get back to that basics. Are you eating, enough? Are you eating every 3 to 5 hours? Are your meals balanced? Are your snacks balanced?
Mhm.
How stressed are you? One thing that I like to focus on too is stress has a way, like I said before, of increasing your blood sugar kind of no matter what. It's just part of the body's process of dealing with stress, because actually, going back to our ancestral days, it thinks that we're running from a danger. So it gives us glucose, which is that energy for our muscle and our brain cells to be able to function
Right.
during those high times. But now we don't know if, we're running from danger, or if we have stress because of deadlines, stress because of, this illness that we've never seen before.
Mhm.
So one thing that I like to do is I teach everyone the take 5 breathing technique. And
Okay.
so especially before you eat, so you allow your body to get into that parasympathetic state, because that's when digestion works more optimally,
Mhm.
is trying to do 5 breaths. So it's 5 seconds on the inhale, 5 seconds on the exhale, and you repeat it 5 times. And that usually puts your body into that parasympathetic state right away and allows for you to relax and eat and digest your food.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good tip right there. So it seems like
Mhm.
being in tune with yourself in terms of like why you're eating, trying to eat like a balanced meal and trying to, before eating, trying to relax, like taking the take 5.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there any other tips or anything right now to help out? Like it seems like instead of focusing on the immune system, you're just going back to like these are the main principles everyone should be doing. Does that
Mhm.
sound
I just really like to right now focus on the main principles, because it's something of setting up that foundation that's good for right now during times of stress, but also long term, because once you have that down, that's when I like to focus on some other nutritional components and aspects. I know people are asking a lot about vitamins and minerals and things that can help, some of those more fringe things that may not have the science behind them, or it's not done on such a widespread level that we really know how it affects larger percentages of the population. But I think, going back to what Tracy said, the main things that we have seen in the literature is zinc, vitamin C, vitamin D. I think those are all really great, especially right now. There's a lot of information coming out about zinc just because of the way it works. It actually kind of goes into the cell, and it stops or shut down that RNA process, so the virus doesn't replicate as much. So that's something that can be really interesting, kind of looking forward.
Yeah. A lot of the studies that I saw with zinc, they're the ones that go along with minimizing like influenza and like the cold is more the lozenges, so they won't get like more of a viral overload in their throat.
Mm-hmm.
That's more the precautionary stuff. Obviously, once it gets into the cell, it helps with that. But yeah,
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of information because COVID-19 isn't technically detrimental itself. A lot of people get it but recover, especially younger populations,
mhm,
or those without other chronic diseases, like I mentioned before. But it's usually some sort of secondary infection or disease that kind of takes hold. So there are things called opportunistic pathogens, and
mhm,
that's usually when the pathogen, whether it be bacteria or virus, kind of gets displaced or enters a new terrain. So there's plenty of different bacteria in our body. There's one, it's called Prevotella. It's usually found in your oral cavity, and that's usually what can be the main cause or factor of gum disease or cavities and things like that.
sure.
But what they're saying is sometimes it can actually cause things like pneumonia when it gets displaced or it has that opportunity,
Okay.
since COVID-19 can kind of weaken your immune system overall and create a lot of inflammation. It kind of can change or become opportunistic.
Okay. Very cool. So, are you in favor of like supplements then on top of like a balance and very like a back to basics type of eating plan?
I definitely think supplements have their place. Again, I would take an individualized approach with that. First, are you eating a varied diet already? If you're not, that's where I would start. Just because supplements too, you want to make sure, because they're not regulated by the FDA, that they are definitely quality supplements, because a lot of times you can find things in supplements like heavy metals or arsenic and other things. So you want to make sure that they're pretty well monitored and tested for things like that. Tracy and I do always recommend companies that we know and think of, that actually do have those safety practices in place.
Right.
So, but definitely I would start with diet first. But if you're still feeling like there's some nutritional deficiencies, I know myself, something I take, and I know that you and Tracy talked about this too, especially for immune health and things like that, or in the winter, is vitamin D. And I take vitamin D with K2 because it kind of helps with the absorption.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I do the same. I take it,
Yeah.
um, and I take it based off my own blood tests. So I
Yeah.
definitely increase my amount of vitamin D, but I also take it with K2 just because it's better absorbed. But
Mhm.
yeah, so I'm right there on board with you about the supplements. It's like very individualized, but
Yeah.
you have to know if it's going to have an effect because like sometimes the vitamin D, some people don't go like it doesn't work for them taking it supplementally. They have to get
Mhm.
it through other means like eating like I hear you get a lot from mushrooms. There's some in
Mhm.
mushrooms and like the skin of like chicken and stuff like that. But obviously the main source is trying to go outside as much as
Yeah,
possible.
definitely getting the sun. And the way that you absorb vitamin D best is through your head and your skin, and then your skin on your hands. That's usually, at least what I've seen, has been the most beneficial. So I think that's again why in the winter, one, you're not in the sun as much, but also you're usually covered from like head to toe with gloves, hats, things like that.
Yeah. And I think right now it's kind of hard to get that because I've noticed when I go out, like I'm covered right now just for protection. That's what
Hmm.
a lot of people are recommending, the masks,
Yeah.
sometimes sunglasses and hat and gloves. But the more skin exposed, it seems the better. But from what you're saying, it's like more of like the head and like hands that get the best
Mhm.
absorption.
Yeah, and also I've been seeing more things about vitamin D absorption through your eyes. I mean, again, this is all new evidence and new literature coming out, so take what I say with a grain of salt. Obviously, do your own research if you know how to read research studies. That's definitely something that I try and do is I don't try and look at things just on my own. I like to see what other people are saying about it, always question things, know where the sources are coming from, who's paying for the research and things like that.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of studies, and I looked at the recommendation. I'm like, oh, this is great. Then I saw where the money came from for the study. Then it made me change my mind. So yeah, learning how to read studies is definitely important for sure. So,
Mhm.
um, are you doing anything differently for people that are more at risk, or um, is there any tips that you would say for other people that are more susceptible to this? Because a lot of them like are recovering just fine, but the more of the at risk people are the ones that are going into like the ICUs and have to be intubated and stuff like
Mhm.
that. Like what do you think? Should people be changing more if they're at risk, or just going back to the basics and getting healthier first?
I definitely think when it comes to nutrition, still focus on the basics. You know, as you get older, it's harder to regulate your blood sugar and that insulin just naturally. So, still just trying to get a varied diet. I usually recommend eating 5 to 7 fruits and vegetables a day. I think people have no problem eating fruit. So I usually recommend trying to, say if you have 5 fruits and vegetables a day, make 3 of those come from vegetables and 2 come from fruit. Try and get that higher ratio of veggie just because it's a lot harder to get vegetables, or people make it seem harder to get more vegetables in their daily diet.
Yeah.
As far as, if you are at risk, I'll just go in line with what, the other medical professionals are saying. Really try and stay inside, be safe. Don't go out in very populated areas, even for walks, because you just never know.
Right.
Um, Trying to get quality sleep, trying to do just the best that you can do, wash your hands, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been tough going for walks, especially like in parks and hiking trails because they're so crowded right now.
I know. I try and figure out the times of days that are like less populated. So usually what I found is like as soon as the workday starts, because a lot of people are working from home.
Mhm.
So around like 8:30, I feel like it's less populated.
Okay.
Around lunchtime, there's a lot of people outside
Yeah.
because then it's warmer too. So
Yeah, it's been nicer as well, and a lot of people have extra time. So yeah, people are being more active. That's for sure,
yeah.
which I'm a fan of. But they're not following a lot of the guidelines of staying away
Mhm.
from people as well.
Yeah,
So
I think taking it indoors, and finding trainers like you who are posting workout videos and things that you can do within your own home is great.
yeah, very cool. All right. Well, this has been great, Victoria. Is there anything else that you would like to touch on?
I think that kind of covers most of it. Just trying to set good foundations, get back to the basics.
Mhm.
If you're feeling overwhelmed or need help nutritionally or with exercise, reach out to people like me, you, family, friends.
Yeah,
Just, keeping it day by day and really focusing on what can I do today or in this moment that's going to help me, later today or tomorrow to have a better day.
fantastic, fantastic. Great information. So if anybody wants more information or wants to work with you, where can they contact you?
They can definitely contact us. So I'm pretty sure the website is still down, everydaynutritionllc.com,
Okay.
but it still has some contact information in there. The best way to reach us is through email. And you can also find us on Everyday Nutrition LLC on Facebook. So I would say that's the best ways to reach us.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, thank you, Victoria.
Yeah, you're welcome. This is
All right,
great.
good, good. All right, everyone. Well, have a good day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.